Angela Merkel is due to win the Nobel Peace Prize this time around. No, seriously, I'm not joking. Hello everyone, and welcome to the Freedom Alternative. In a recent video of mine, I made the case that the United Nations is a joke. A sick, tasteless, and utterly messed up one, but a joke nonetheless. Today, I wish to add another holy grail of our moral superiors from the middle and upper middle class left-wing pricks in the cathedral media and the progressive governments and the taxpayer-funded NGOs on the list of the sick, tasteless, and utterly messed up jokes, namely the Nobel Peace Prize. You see, the announcement that Angela Merkel is due to win the Nobel Peace Prize at the end of this week is not in and of itself what makes this utterly idiotic prize to be an utterly messed up joke. Awarding it to Angela Merkel is just the latest moment in a very, very long stream of moments in which the Nobel Peace Prize proved itself beyond all reasonable doubt to be an utter joke. What makes this announcement special is that the Nobel Peace Prize is usually awarded before one gets to make stupid things that contribute to the exact opposite of peace, although that's not a rule either. Do you remember 2012? After trapping several nations, Greece and Portugal amongst them, into the wrong currency and fostering more division and unrest than in the previous 30 to 40 years, the Nobel Peace Prize Committee decided that it's a fabulous idea to award the prize to the European Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. Since then, the EU-SSR continued to undermine peace in Europe, particularly by bringing in more diversity and progress, which led to more youth violence. And that's, of course, besides the undermining of the economic development of its composing nations through idiotic economic policies that placed the youth unemployment in several nations to levels thought to be almost impossible just 20 years ago. But then again, under socialism, everything is possible. Do you remember 2009? After doing exactly nothing but having the politically correct skin color, the esteemed Norwegian committee decided to award the prize to Hussein Obama. After that, Obama did his best to undermine peace both within his country's borders and internationally. Through repeated racialist agitprop, with the help of Al Sharpton, but that's a different story, the United States is now less free, more divided, and less peaceful under the Nobel Peace Prize winner's progressive governance. Internationally, the United States has, for the first time, managed to let down its allies. Through non-action, the Obama administration has allowed the Budapest Memorandum to be torn apart, the Islamic State to be created, and Iran to get one step closer to becoming nuclear. And that's just to scratch the surface. 2 years before, the same Norwegian committee was awarding the Nobel Peace Prize to Al Gore and the IPCC. The same IPCC that is now under a silent but vicious scandal for manufacturing data, and the same Al Gore who was so convinced of his man-made global warming narrative that he went on and built a mansion right on the edge of the sea which was supposed to rise, according to Mr. Gore. Apparently, making a nice fiction movie and manufacturing some data to suit the progressivist narrative is more than enough to be considered to having contributed to world peace. In 2002, the esteemed Norwegian committee decided to award the prize to Jimmy Carter. Apparently, being amongst the worst presidents in the United States pays dividends with the Nobel Peace Prize Committee. Carter was, amongst other monumental failures, instrumental in allowing the formation of one of the most repressive regimes on the planet, namely the Islamic Republic of Iran. So much for peace. Are you tired of this? Come on, I just warmed up. Let's go further. 1 year earlier, in 2001, the esteemed Nobel Peace Prize the committee decided to award the prize to Kofi Annan, an individual with a spectacular legacy of failure and one of the most well-known anti-American bigots to have ever served in an international body. To be fair, we owe to Kofi Annan the realization that the United Nations is a tasteless joke. Without the Annan-led spectacular failures of the UN in Bosnia, Sudan, Congo or Rwanda, or without the Annan-led spectacular appeasement of having dictators lead the Human Rights Council at the UN, without all of these, many people might have still believed today that the UN is not a sick and tasteless joke. Failure, or genocide, and sometimes both, seem to be a common occurrence amongst the winners of the Nobel Peace Prize. Now, you'll say that I only looked as far back as 2001, but the reality is that in every decade there is at least one spectacular failure from the Nobel Peace Prize. In 1994, the prize went to the KGB-trained terrorist Yasser Arafat. Arafat is the father of most of the Islamist movements that plague the Middle East to this very day. Much peace, indeed. In 1993, the prize went to the communist terrorist Nelson Mandela. In 1989, the prize went to the 14th Dalai Lama for the continuous struggle to maintain a caste type of slavery system in Tibet and called that a liberation. Now, I'm not saying that the Chinese alternative is necessarily better, but this belief that struggling to maintain a 10th century order is somehow liberation and peace is just utterly insane. In 1976, the prize went to Agnese Gonje Boyajiu, or commonly known as Mother Teresa, because apparently creating death houses and calling them hospices contributes to world peace. Although, to be fair, the inmates were indeed dying in some sort of peace. I guess that counts. In 1973, the prize went to Henry Kissinger. Now, anyone who has read his book, The Diplomacy, knows full well that a lot of things can be said about Mr. Kissinger, but one of the few things that cannot legitimately be said about him is that he is a peacemaker. Mr. Kissinger is a lot of things, some good, some bad, as with any proponent of realpolitik. In fact, his 1973 Peace Prize was also awarded with some controversy, with 2 members of the Norwegian committee resigning in protest. If we go on the list of people who were nominated for the prize but did not win it, we find some even more interesting stories. For instance, a man named Josef Djugashvili, more commonly known as Josef Vissarionovich Stalin, was nominated twice for the Nobel Peace Prize, once in 1945 and once in 1948. Apparently, committing Holodomor, which was the largest Holocaust committed in Europe, larger than the one perpetrated by the other socialists, the National Socialists, that's more than enough to be nominated twice for the Nobel Peace Prize. Mind you, the realities of the Holodomor were already known in 1948, but that didn't really matter. You don't learn about these things in school nowadays, just like you don't learn about the third Holocaust that occurred in Europe in the 20th century, namely the Ottoman-perpetrated Holocaust against the Armenians. In fact, denying that Holocaust is still okay virtually everywhere. And not only it is okay, but actively praised. There is even a far-left channel network right here on YouTube named after a brigade of Turkish exterminators of Armenians. I am of course referring to the Young Turks. Now imagine the outrage if there were a network called the Waffen-SS. So, in light of these realities, awarding the Nobel Peace Prize to Angela Merkel doesn't sound really that surprising anymore, doesn't it? I mean, it's not really that bad. All she did was to invite the whole Muslim world into Europe, then make a U-turn halfway through, which led to staggering levels of violence in Serbia, Greece and Italy, and already an increase of various forms of violence from rape to beatings in Germany. To fix things, now Mrs. Merkel appeals to the old tool of state-sanctioned segregation, state-sanctioned deportation through EU quotas, and of course state-sanctioned eviction of civilian flats to make room for diversity and progress. Sounds like the perfect candidate for a Nobel Peace Prize to me. Oh, did I mention that Benito Mussolini and Adolf Hitler were also among the nominees for a Nobel Peace Prize? That's all I have to say. Thanks for watching.